Howdy guys, Professor H here. I thought we would finally take on that very difficult, time-consuming, tear-jerking topic called controllers. So in this video, or actually we're going to do it in a series of videos, we're going to build some controller-based topologies. So come on along, it'll be fun. Okay gang, as promised, here is your controller how-to video. What I've picked up is right where you guys are going to start. I saved a little bit of time. I've already done the reboot on the controller. So what I'm going to do is follow right along in the lab, just like you guys are going to do. Hopefully, I'm doing this in the lab, so hopefully you can hear over the machine noise, and hopefully I'm not disturbing too many guys around me. And I'm going to have the lab instructions right in front of me, and you can see right what I'm doing as I go. So at this point, we've sort of gotten through the reboot, and you can see that I'm just going right through the same config that you're going to do. Now, I don't know if you've been told this, but the magic number in the controller lab is 2. You're going to have 2 VLANs, 2 networks, 2 sets of devices, and that's the way we're going to go. Now, one of the things that you want to do before you start this configuration is to actually sort of think about what you're going to do. And so we are going to have a management network, and then you're going to have a data network. And so that's the way that I'm going to start this. The AP manager, the management interface, and the APs are all going to be on the same management network. So that is something that can be very, very helpful as you go. So here we go on the service interface. I'm not actually going to use the service interface at all. So I'm going to go ahead and put none there. Now, clearly it wants me to do something here. So I'm going to go ahead and give it something that I know I'm not going to use. So I'm not going to use the 2 network at all. And so we'll just make it happy. We are not going to do link aggregation at all. You could do them to the controllers, but we don't actually do that around here. Now this is the management interface. This is the guy that you're going to use to browse to. And so I'm going to set all my management stuff up on the 10 net. So this is what I'm going to do here. Now remember that this is an IP address that goes to a host, so I'm not going to end in .0. I need an actual IP address. And whoops, there we go, like that. Default router, we're not actually going to need one. We're not going to route to this, but I'll go ahead and give it one just for fun. Okay. All right. Now, management VLAN. I'm going to be coming to this, the web interface, from the switch. And so I'm going to need a management VLAN to get there. Since I'm using the 10 net, it makes sense. We'll match it all up and we'll use the 10 net for the VLAN. Now on the front of the controller, you may have noticed that there are a couple of physical ports we're going to connect to. We're going to use port number 1. These are actually numbered right on the front of the controller. Alright, so we'll just scroll down here a little bit so we can see. Now your APs are going to be getting IP addresses from the controller itself, and you're going to be running a couple of DHCP servers, or at least a couple of DHCP pools out there, one for hosts and one for the APs. We're going to go ahead and set this guy up here on, we're going to do the same thing on the for the APs, I guess, that we're going to do for those. So for right now, I'm just going to set this up. The nice thing is that when we get into the controller interface from the GUI, we can fix all this stuff when we get there if we decide to change things around a little bit. Okay, now the AP manager, again, this is going to be the interface that the APs are actually going to talk to. I'm not going to talk to this guy, but this is what the APs are going to use to communicate with, and this is also going to be on my management network. So I'm going to give this guy one more than my other one, and we'll go ahead and do the same. Virtual gateway IP address, we're not actually going to use this, so I'll put him in the same sort of pigeonhole that I do the other one. Oh, I didn't, whoops. Well, maybe I didn't wipe the config here. So we'll go ahead and move this guy off here. Mobility RF group name. Now we're not actually going to have one of these. As we can see here. Because we're not actually going to be roaming around too much. Your nodes will be roaming around between APs, but not between mobility groups. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a test. Now your SSID, you'll eventually create your own SSIDs here. And I'd rather do this through the GUI, but I'm just going to call this Bruce. And we'll see how that sets up later on. Now allow static IP addresses. I've already said that the hosts are going to get IP addresses from the controller. So I'm going to say no here, and we'll see where that works out when we get to the GUI. I'm going to put no here as well. Country code, US, sure. Enable the 802.11b network. Well, I'm not really sure what I want to do. We can fix this later on. I'm thinking 802.11a. I'm feeling that right now, so I'm going to do that. We'll do a yes to 802.11a. Auto RF, no, because we're going to futz around with all this. No to an NTP server. That's a time server. System time, I don't care about for right now. And we'll say yes. Alright, so it's setting up here. Now the next thing that I need to do is talk to the switch. I haven't actually done that. As I said, I'm starting this over. So theoretically, my controller is ready to go now. So I'm going to go back up over here. And the only thing that I've got configured at this point, this is what I'm working on right here. So I'm consoled into the controller, and my controller is connected to the 3550. I've got my SFPs already installed, but I don't actually have a node out here on my wired side. I don't have a management node yet. So I actually have to do that. So if I scroll down a little bit here, this is where I'm gonna do my next step. So we just walk through this particular activity where we reset the controller, and so now I'm gonna work on this guy here. All right, so hold on a second, I'll take care of that. All right, and we're back. Now what we have going on now is the wired side of this. So we take a look at my topology diagram over here. I had my management node talking to my controller, but remember that that was a console connection as indicated here. So I was straight into the console on the front of the controller. I rebooted the controller, I cleared the config, and then I gave the controller its basic config, and then it rebooted. Okay. So what I'm trying to do now is get to the controller from the web interface. And so what I have to do is set up a couple of things. So what I've done so far is I gave my management node here an IP address, and I wired it up to my switch, but I haven't configured the switch at all. So what I'm going to do is go into the switch, and maybe I'll raise this up a little bit so you can see it better. Okay. And I'm going to create the same VLAN that I did on the controller for my management node. Remember that my management node is going to be on the management network, and I got to be able to talk to the 10 net. So I like to keep everything straight in my head, so I'm going to go to interface F0/10, and I'm going to say switch port access VLAN 10. So now I've got my management node right here connected to the switch via Ethernet. It's connected to port 10. I put port 10 in VLAN 10, and I gave this management node an IP address on the 10 net because that's my management network. Now I'm not quite done yet because this switch actually has to talk to the controller, and we're going to be dealing with a bunch of VLANs. Whenever we want to do that, we have to set up a trunk line. So I'm going to go to my gig interfaces. Okay, whoops. And and I'm going to make that guy a trunk. So there's two things I need to do. I need to specify the encapsulation I'm going to use, and then I also need to tell it that it's a trunk. So I'm going to do switchboard trunk encapsulation .1q. Okay. So that is the trunking protocol I'm going to use, and then I'm going to say switchboard mode trunk. Alright, so I'm doing this live here. Hopefully I haven't forgotten anything. And as soon as this comes up, I believe I'm on gig 0 or gig 0/1. So let's go over here and check a couple of things. So this is my host. So I'm going to do IP config, and you can see that I'm 10.99 right here. So let's see if I can ping the controller. Geez, hopefully I didn't use the wrong port up there. Timeout, timeout, timeout. Hey, this is live, so you never know what I may have done here. Let me shut down my wireless interface here. Make sure we're not sending traffic the wrong way. And we'll try that again. Hey, look at that. Okay, so that's actually a good thing to remember. If you have more than one interface up, your routing table is going to be set up to forward traffic in a particular way. And so that's actually what happened to me. I forgot to bring down my wireless interface. Okay, well, it looks like I'm ready to go. So since I can ping the controller now, remember that 10.1 was the address of the controller. 10.2 is the AP manager. I can ping both of these guys. So let's go ahead and try out my Internet Explorer. Okay. So before I do that, ask me later. So let's see where we are in our lab now. So here I was consoled in. Now I'm capable of pinging the management interfaces on the controller via the switch. So I created my VLANs. Okay. So now I'm ready to see if I can try to browse. So what I'm going to do is go up here to my browser, and remember that I've got to use HTTPS. And let's try this out. Continue to this website, not recommended. It's very scary. Hey, ta-da! There we have it. Once I've gotten to this point, I really want to just use the controller interface alone through the GUI. If I get into real trouble, then I can use the console. But at this point, I really don't need the console anymore. I'd also like to point out that I don't want to have the APs connected at this point in time. Okay. No thank you, Lenovo. And there's our controller. So here's the interfaces that I've connected to, or that I've configured so far. Okay. Couple of your main pages. So this is our summary page. We can see that the controller's up over here, that I have some RF interface, but down here I have no clients. I don't have anything going on. The two big tabs that I'm going to worry about are my controller tab and then my wireless LAN tab. And you can see that when I was doing my configuration, you saw that I configured an SSID for Bruce. If I look under interfaces, these are all the management interfaces that I've configured so far. So there's my AP manager interface, my management interface, the service port, and then the virtual ports. And as you know, we're not going to use these guys at this point. So we have a pretty good check thus far. Now I'll just note here that later on you're going to have to create what we call a dynamic interface. That'll be important to us, but we're going to follow this step by step. So let me get this guy out of the way, move him off to the side, and we'll just keep working through our lab. let's see. We logged in. We're in good shape here. Now, getting your two APs, I suppose this is getting a little ahead of ourselves. So I'm actually going to skip this at this point because they're not actually going to be able to talk to the controller because they don't have IP addresses. So let's actually go to our configuration. So we're going to go to our controller manual, our controller interface, master controller mode, and I am going to be the master controller here, and we'll apply this. Master controller is just an indication that that I'm the only one here, and then I want to start doing some configuration. So now let's go ahead and do our dynamic interface. So I'm going to do new, and this will be our dynamic interface name, and I don't know, we'll call it Dino Bruce. How about that? Now, VLAN ID, we're eventually going to use this for our clients. So we are going to need a VLAN for our interface here. So since we're on the 10 net for our management, let's go to the 20 for our dynamic interface. And I actually want to show you something here as we get in here. I think we've got it in the lab. Here we go. So I'm going to blow this up a little bit so you can see a little bit better what we have going on. So if this is our controller, these are the physical interfaces on the front of it. Here's our service port, but here's the one that I'm actually worried about. This is port 1 or 2 on the front of the controller, and you can see that my AP manager goes out through that physical port. My management interface goes out through that physical port. The manager interface is what I'm talking to right now. I'm browsed to the management interface. The AP manager is the one that we're going to use to connect to the APs. And then up here is a dynamic interface, okay, also using the same physical interface. But we can see that it's got a VLAN all to its own, and then I'm going to tie the SSID or the wireless LAN back to this dynamic interface. All right, so that's actually what we're working on here. So my physical port number is going to be port 1 that I actually want to use. And let's go back to the lab portion that we're actually using. I apologize for the scrolling around here. Whoops. Okay. The address will be one of the same addresses that we're actually using for our network. Now the management network that this guy is going to come from is going to be a little bit different here. So let's actually think a little bit about what we're going to do here. We are going to set up a network for this particular set of clients when we get there. And we're going to tie everything associated with those clients to this particular network. The only gotcha is that the controller is where this is going to come from. So that's probably one of the confusing things about this. So we'll start with this guy here. I'm going to go ahead and give the management interface, let's actually give it yeah, I guess we'll put him on the 20 net. Do that. And oops. And again, I can fix all this or rearrange it later on. Now I'm trying to separate the ideas of gateway, and you'll see why I want to do that later on. We're going to have to route to somebody else eventually. So this is going to be my management interface here. I don't have any ACLs, and so I guess we'll go ahead and apply this at this point. And that's okay. Alright, so now I've got this management interface. Alright. And this allows me to tie my SSID and my wireless LAN back there. Okay, so let's go back over here to wireless LAN. That's really what we want. And I'm going to create a new wireless LAN. So let's go. And call this wireless LAN 2. The SSID that I'm going to use is Hartpence. And I guess we're good here at this point. All right, we'll apply that. All right, so this is our configuration for this guy here. And I guess I'm jumping around a little bit, but we'll go ahead and do a couple of things under the wireless LAN that we know we're going to have to do. We're going to have to enable this guy, and we're going to have to tie it to our dynamic interface. So we know we're going to have to do that. I'm not going to set up any security at this point. So we're going to have no security. We're not going to be doing anything with quality of service either. So we could disable that guy. Now our advanced. The only thing that we're going to need to do here is make sure that we're going to do DHCP address assignment. And we'll apply that. Now under the advanced tab over here, we've got our AP groups, and this is actually where we're going to add our APs in there later on, but since we don't have any APs at this point, we can't really do that. Alright. Now, as I mentioned, our magic number is 2. So one of the other things that I have to do here, and part of our lab, is that we have to create some scopes here, right there. So let's go over here and create, under our internal DHCP server, our DHCP scope. And I'll expand this a little bit here. Alright, so we need 2 scopes. One is for the APs. So I'll just call this AP scope. Now what about our AP scope? Remember that the APs are going to wind up being on the same management network as our management interfaces. So that means that we need to give them IP addresses on the same network. So that's going to be the 10 network, but where on the 10 network? How about we give them addresses in the range of 10 to maybe, well, we don't have a lot of APs, but we'll go ahead and give it a range of 10 to 15. How about that? So that gives us some range there. And this will be on the 10 network. Our mask, 255, 255, 255, 0. And we'll go ahead and give a default gateway here. Notice that I'm using the same values that you've seen earlier, and we need to enable this. Now theoretically right now, if I went up there and connected a couple of APs, they would get IP addresses from my controller. Right? And you can see that I've got this scope up here. Well, this scope again is going to be for the APs themselves. It's on the 10 net, and this is also the address that the APs are going to use when they want to talk to the controller via the protocol that they need to get all their configuration information. And that's going to be CAPWAP or LWAPP. I also need to create a scope here for my hosts. So I need a host scope. And my hosts are going to be on the 20 net. So let's give them something completely different so that I can recognize them. So let's put them up at 200 somewhere. at 210. So the network here. Like that. My default router. I think that'll do it. And let's enable this guy. Everything looks okay, but again, if we have oopses, we can always go back and fix it. So theoretically, what we have going on right now is that we've got a host scope and we've got an AP scope. All right. So let's go back over here to my wireless LAN. And I've got this guy here again. And we've got Dino Bruce and all that. But let's take a peek at my interfaces. Make sure that we've got everything configured here. I'm just checking to make sure that we have it okay here. I'm not doing dynamic AP management on this particular interface because this is for my host. So let me see. I like it. I like it. Thinking what else we want here. Alright, I'm going to take a pause for the cause here. I'm going to go add our controllers, or add the APs to the controller. Alright, well, so far this has been a lot of work. So we're going to take a little break here, and I'm going to go to part 2. So this will be a 2-part set of videos on controllers. See you on the next one.